Welcome to another Bearable conversation with Jillian Seguin and myself, John Reyes. As is customary at the beginning of every one of these podcasts, we have to tell our title. And we are aiming to make sure that we get this done correctly at some point. So let's attempt it now.
Okay, I am Jillian Seguin, Associate Wealth Advisor at Reyes Group at IA Private Wealth.
And I am John Reyes, Wealth Advisor at Reyes Group at IA Private Wealth.
And we are really fortunate to have a celebrity in the house today.
Well, B level C, but yes, celebrity nonetheless. Craig Basinger, who is coming to us from Purpose Investment.
He's the Chief Market Strategist at Purpose Investment. So, Craig, thank you so much for being here.
If I'm a B-level celebrity, should I be on one of those, whatever, Temptation Island or something
Dancing
like that?
with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars.
You will. How is your cha-cha-cha?
I'm going to have to work on that.
Okay.
And honestly, this is really B level, like, filming it.
I was told there'd be no cha-cha-cha during this, but I'm willing to go with it.
You never know. We just go where it flows.
All right.
In all seriousness, I am very grateful, and we don't want this to just think like it's a plug. I was just telling Craig before we started how grateful I am for the amount of years that you've been very supportive, first of me and then of our team, and now that it's growing. You know, we sat in two chairs, probably no bigger than that, in my office in Richardson when I was inheriting an interesting situation, and you gave me very strong words of encouragement, and you've lived up to that, and you've continued to help support our practice as we continue to grow, and we know how busy you are, so thank you very much for making the time. In honor of it, I did wear a Drake OVO sweater straight from the 406, 416?
416.
416, T-Dot, there we go.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there,
Good.
but let's start and be more serious. Today's episode is going to be focusing on behavioral finance. I think that it's something that's extremely important and often very much overlooked. This is something that is at the root of a lot of the decisions that we make or we try to make, is to try our best to understand the psychology of the investor and work through it. So maybe we can have some opening remarks about from yourself and your knowledge or high level, and then kind of break it down from there and see how the podcast evolves.
Sounds good. Yeah. Listen, I manage money. That's my job, but I will share that my education is in both economics and psychology, which is actually the intersection of two disciplines where behavioral economics was born not that many years ago, but quite a few. The really neat thing is about investing is it's not a natural act. Like, putting your money at risk is not something anybody really wants to do. All of us value our money. It affords us our lifestyle or our future lifestyle. It enables us to do things that we want to do. And very often investing requires us to put that money at risk to hopefully grow it over time. And of course, we've all seen the long data on why you should invest and the power of compounding being the eighth wonder of the world. The challenge, though, is, we're sort of pre-coded as humans to sort of protect ourselves. I mean, if you go back, fight or flight is a natural reaction for us humans. And as we evolved over time, we were quickly taught if something's painful or there's risk, very often we want to run away to protect ourselves. And that has worked out really well for us over time as we've evolved to where we are now, living in our nice places, and not really at risk on the savannah any longer. But nonetheless, when it comes down to investing, it's kind of the same thing. And sometimes, markets get volatile and they get risky and it hurts. And the challenge becomes that's usually the time when people make sort of the behavioral mistake, whether it's capitulating and running away because that's what they feel in their gut is the right thing to do, where that can actually cause the most long-term damage to your wealth accumulation. So that's one of the environments. But I'll talk about the other one, which is probably more apropos today, which is the fear of missing out. That is a behavioral mechanism. I mean, everybody, if you look at the S&P so far this year, it's actually on track to have one of possibly its best year in the last 20. Like, it's very close. Of course, the year's not over. We got some little elections, which will, that's a whole nother behavioral mix. But
Exactly.
But nonetheless, like, this environment is like, with these markets moving higher, has caused people to say, hold on, I should be making more. Look at what the S&P 500 has done. I should be there. And the challenge then is, you have people being lured by that sort of the greed component. And really, a lot of this comes down to the behavioral aspect and the behavioral aspect of us as investors and us as humans. And I've often believed, listen, investing is very hard. Like outperforming indices is challenging, but building more resilient portfolios and building portfolios that can minimize people's making those behavioral mistakes, I think is one of the key attributes of what we do in the wealth industry. And the other aspect is coaching, like educating people. I mean, one of the best ways to defend against some of these behavioral biases that can sort of lead us astray on our long-term journey of wealth accumulation, education and coaching from your advisor can go a long way and help mitigate or reduce the risks of making those kind of behavioral mistakes.
You go ahead, because I was going to say something, but you go first.
I was going to say, I think I've said in previous podcasts that I feel, though my title is associate wealth advisor, I feel like a glorified therapist. And the two emotions that we battle every day with clients is greed and fear. And the dialogue that we have is, how do we respond versus reacting? So those are the types of things. But what I was going to say is, it's really interesting when you talk about education and education as an advisor. I look at my Canadian Securities book. The last course that I did was my professional management techniques. And I think they had 2 to 3 chapters devoted specifically to investor biases, like not looking at charts, not looking at how to, PE earnings and all those kinds of things, but just really looking at biases and behavior. So how you're talking about emotions a lot in your previous response, how much do actual childhood biases or things that you've been brought up with impact your investing?
Well, it's not even childhood. I mean, we all have them. I mean, possibly one of the biggest one out there that impacts the investment world is confirmation bias. We are naturally predisposed to hear information that we already agree with and actually have that resonate with us. And very often when we hear, contrary views, to discount them or discredit the source and sort of ignore those. And the problem with that, of course, is that gets you very narrowly focused. I have said in different client events on this topic, take the media, for example. I mean, the media, listen, I think the media does an interesting job, but I don't think it does a very good job for investors because they try to be extreme in one direction or the other because, again, it's a media
It's an entertainment value.
Yeah, they're trying to, they're selling ads and they need more people to watch. And if they say, hey, you know what, this is going to be an average year, nobody's going to watch. They want somebody to say this is going to be a great year or it's going to be a terrible year. But the fact is, like, our confirmation bias still has us listening to views that we already agree with. And one of my favorite analogies is, CNN versus Fox News. Now, usually when I'm giving a client event, I'll ask, who here watches Fox News? And usually one person puts up their hand.
No.
And then you say, who here, watches CNN? And more hands go up. But nonetheless, one is obviously a little bit more tilted to the left, one is more tilted to the right, and they're playing to their audience. The key thing is they're very often talking about the same topics, just from very different vantage points. So I often will say, listen, the best way to help address your confirmation bias is if you're going to watch 20 minutes of CNN, then force yourself to watch 10 minutes of Fox News, just for the very reason that you want to see what the other side of the argument is saying. You might still discredit it, you might disregard it, but at least you're going to actually hear it. And once you start hearing the different arguments and the different sides, I think it leads you to suffer less from confirmation bias and probably make better decisions, which, if you really boil deep down into behavioral finance, what it's really trying to do is find out where our blind spots are, where our biases are, and then how do we actually make better decisions?
Yeah.
And that's really the crux of that discipline.
I think that's something that, again, as always, you're so well spoken, and I always credit it because when you're dressed like this, you need somebody that actually looks like they know what they're talking about biases. So it's always appreciative because those types of viewpoints are encouraging because it's echoing the things that we talk about. For me, the way that I look at it is I'm a pretty simplistic guy. I love pizza. So I'll give you an example. of something that happened to me and what I think is happening to the parallel. I'm going to parallel it to the investment world, talking about the comment of we're getting to the point of the S&P maybe having its best year in 20 years. Okay, so here's how it works. When you're a family of 5 like myself, and this is before my daughter got celiac, we order pizza from Domino's. Do you want to know why? Very simply put, I put it in order, I hit the buying this, I order, I pay, and then like a little rat in a cage, I can look at this little ticker thing across the top and it tells me where my pizza is. It tells me it's in the oven, it tells me it's coming out, it tells me it's getting ready, it's telling me it's going to get delivered. Okay, I love that. That's how I'm conditioned. Fast forward, my son and I recently were at a showcase for hockey in a small town. We wanted pizza. They didn't have a Domino's, but they had a local place, was told it was great pizza, so we ordered from it. But I had to pick up the phone, I ordered, told them what I wanted, and they said it would be there soon. That was literally their turn. And so then I hung up the phone. I checked my phone, and I'm not proud to admit this, but between me and my son, we would have called back the pizza joint 4 or 5 times to ask us when it was going to be delivered. Now, I promise you, in my mind, it was over an hour. But when I looked, I made those calls in a span of 20 minutes. Why? Because I am now left to the devices of having information so readily available to me through the, Domino's Pizza app. And that guidance gave me the time to temper myself and understand, so I didn't overcommit, I didn't get upset, I didn't make a bad decision. But the moment that was taken away from me and I was forced to maybe make a decision because I had lack of information, I had perceived lack of information, perceived lack of direction, I was ready to call it in, sell it out. I didn't want it. I wanted to call back and say I want a different pizza place, whatever it might have been. The parallels are, how I see it, is even though we know the S&P keeps ticking up and ticking up and ticking up, we're seeing more and more people just add on because they're worried they're going to miss, even though they're the ones driving it higher and higher. So my parallel is this. If we equate the Domino's Pizza app to having a steady hand as an advisor and having one where you're being forced to make decisions with limited information, is that not what's happening to push this S&P finally over a cliff that might have a correction? A lot of stuff I just said, I know.
Well, now I'm hungry.
Fair enough.
And where do your 16 cheeseburgers come into this?
That doesn't count because that was on Saturday. This was the order on Friday.
Okay.
What I'm trying to get at is when we feel like we have information, we can
respond versus react.
That's right. So why, I guess the question is, do we still see the S&P continue to climb even though we all know collectively that this is not, that eventually this is going to have to correct?
Well, so, I think this is where it gets a bit challenging because we're now mixing in sort of market expectations with behavioral finance, and
I know it can be a challenge.
Yeah, no. But I would say, I think it's more of a Pavlovian issue you have when you order pizza with the ringing of the bell and salivating. That's pure psychology. So that
I called 6 times, Craig, in a 20-minute span.
That's not behavioral economics. That's right out of.
Got it. Fair enough. Thank you for the correction.
With ringing of a bell. But listen, I think the key aspect here is if there is a danger in actually watching something over and over and believing that is actually feeding you information, because what really is happening is people very often will suffer from recency bias.
Okay.
I've been in this industry a little while, since the mid-90s, so which is a decent amount of time, but still not a long time when it comes to investing. And I would point out that it's very easy to talk to people today that have completely forgotten about 2008 bear market, have experienced a pandemic or a COVID bear market, which I'll put quotes on because, listen, it was over in 6 weeks, right? So that really has taught people this reaction function based on recency bias and just what's happened the feedback they're getting and putting more and more emphasis on that. Where if you actually look longer term, you run into, listen, there was a bear market in 2000 to 2003. Now, I didn't say two bear markets. This is one bear market that lasted 3 years. So markets went down for 3 years. Now, if you told anybody who's only been investing 10, 15 years now, they would say, that is crazy. It will never happen again. But it probably will. Now, I don't know when. We're not going to get into the forecasting side. But I think the key aspect here is, we talked about confirmation bias. I think recency bias, whether it's watching your app for your food delivery or watching markets move higher and believing that this is actually all the evidence I need to make an investment decision, it isn't. And the key thing is, markets change, market dynamics change. Don't get me wrong, I'm not being all bearish or anything, but this is certainly an interesting bull market that we're in right now. And it will end, and there will be a bear market, and that's what history has taught us. And some of them will be shorter, some of them will be longer, some of them will be quick, more dramatic or less dramatic. And you never actually know what's going to happen. But the key aspect is you can't focus on what has just happened. And when I say just happened, I mean in the last 2, 3, 5 years, and believe that that is normal, because, every day the market is made up. And this is a key. This is why behavioral finance has a home when it comes to investing. The market is made up of people. And listen, any given company within the S&P 500, whatever you want to look at, 98% of the people who own that company are not trading on a given day, and 1% or 2% are. And those 1 or 2%, or those few people, they are the ones that are determining the price of that asset for everyone, because those are the marginal buyer and seller.
And they have TikTok accounts.
And they might have TikTok accounts or
Reddit
or something.
But nonetheless, it's the behavioral of the small group that actually moves the entire market. And the key thing is that behavior can change. It can change from cockeyed optimism, which is what I would say the market is today, believing that everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about the war. Don't worry about the election. Inflation's all gone. Off we go, to the complete opposite. And, it will. And that's just human nature. And that's one of the challenging aspects about investing, is because it's a behavioral science, and the behavior of the participants change over time. And they change based on technology, they change based on their age. And as that changes, the market dynamic changes, and that creates different market environments. But again, the key message here is what's happening today. Yes, it's interesting. Yes, it's an input, but you really have to take a longer term view. And when you come to building portfolios, I don't think looking at the last 6 months or 12 months should be driving a portfolio decision. It should be sort of your objectives, what you're trying to achieve over the longer term. And remember, the behavioral finance sort of dictates that, what's going to happen if this market goes down 20%? Are you going to all of a sudden try to pull your money out? And again, that is probably one of the most damaging aspects to wealth creation in the long term. And that's really what we're trying to sort of address here. Understanding that these things can happen, understanding that when they do, you're going to be more prone to make a behavioral mistake because your emotions are going to be elevated, and trying to mitigate those risks.
And there's two things just on that, is that actually those corrections, or at least dips in the market, are healthy, and they can actually benefit you longer term if you have conviction, if you have a strategy in place, and you don't bail as soon as you get a little bit of water in the boat. Find a solution and keep rowing, and you'll find your safety somehow. I wanted to talk about also we champion a lot and remind clients a lot that markets are forward looking. So even if you're reacting to something that's happening right now, chances are it's already very much baked into the market, right? And so that, I think, is where you do the greatest disservice, is when you do make a change based on what's happening today, and we already know the market has factored that in a long time ago. That's when you're kind of cutting your, what's the expression, nose to spite your face, or whatever.
Baby with the bathwater.
That's
You
right,
can just keep
right?
coming up with analogies all day. I think,
Exactly.
It's John's turn, not to put you on the spot.
No, 18 hamburgers before noon.
I don't know how that works.
No, well, it's
but-
about as convoluted as what I said before.
But you are right. Like, markets are forward-looking. I like to think them as forward-guessing
Yes.
because, again, they're trying to guess what's going to happen and
Yeah.
what the implications are. You're right. And I think the only one constant I have found with markets in my career has been, one, they certainly don't like uncertainty. So when uncertainty goes up, all bets are off. But the other aspect is they overreact. They overreact because it's those small percentage of people that are actually dictating the price of a given asset at a given point in time. And they overreact in both directions. And the key aspect for a long-term investor is not to overreact in either direction. And if you can avoid doing that, that should help you achieve your goals.
I think that I've got a closing statement or remark, I think, that I would like to see. And if you want to comment, you can. If you feel that there's value to be added, it's, that small percentage of people or bots or whatever they might be, and then you overlay the fact that we are probably going through one of the largest wealth transfers that's, at least I think we can see in my career, between baby boomers to the next generation as they start to kind of, transition their wealth, move on, pass away, whatever it might be. We're putting it into hands of individuals that, talk about uncertainty, right? There's a lot of people that want to paint them in one way, right? That they all want to be do-it-yourselfers, or there's another painting of a brush that, that they need a ton of hand-holding. I'm very interested to see what happens in this next 5 to 10 years, because that wealth transfer is going to be unparalleled, at least unless because you've got a lot of knowledge of, I don't think there's any other bigger time that this has ever happened in history, right? Where you're going to have a whack of money, whack of wealth get transferred to a new generation where I really don't know what way they're going to go. That's my personal belief. So I don't know if you've thought about that much, but I'm not that I'm concerned. I mean, it's interesting, but it's going to be dynamically different, because some of those clients were winning over and they get it, and some of them are just hard stop. No, I can do it through XYZ platform, and so I don't know. I don't know if you have a comment on that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but that's one that I've been kind of wrestling with.
It's a very valid point. It is, it is a bigger wealth transfer, not because of just because of the demographics. It's also because of the accumulated wealth has never been this great as well. So,
yeah.
Most of us are wealthier than our parents.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're not watching.
Yeah.
Well, don't take it personally, but
They'll be watching you do your cha-cha-cha. And
maybe, perhaps.
Yeah.
But 100%. Like I mean that. But what I would also point out, as a lot of people when they first start to become investors and savers, they do tend to want to do things on their own and experiment and do things, and that very often happens. And then I find once your situation starts to get more complex and there's more nuances to it and you realize you're making mistakes, that's when the value of advice, I think, really starts to come in, whether it's on the wealth planning side, whether it's mapping out the journey side, whether it's actually trying to think of like the longer term 20, 30, 50-year-old goal, as opposed to like, hey, what can I buy today? Like AI, NVIDIA, whatever it is, like what exciting things can I buy today that are going to give me excitement? And I think that changes over time when investing gradually morphs from something that is partially entertainment to something that is more, more foundational, and tax gets involved and everything gets more complicated. And I think that everybody kind of goes on that journey. And I think these generations will go through that journey as well. So
Very well said.
Yeah, they say actually, I had read, I cannot remember where, that for every extra dollar you make, it's a diminishing return emotionally. Like your utility goes down. For every dollar you make, the less happy you are. But for every dollar you lose, the emotional and psychological toll it takes on you just continues to amplify. And I find that's also a very, very interesting dynamic. You wrote, just to close out on my side, you wrote an amazing piece on individuals, behavioral finance, and specifically FOMO, fear of missing out, and how your tactical fund is a really good way to kind of manage that. Do you want to just comment a little bit on that, or?
Yeah, listen.
And that's a plug.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I get it.
Look at, wait,
we call
here,
it a
I
plug.
logged it up.
I was Listen, I am a firm believer that very often when it comes to investing, we as individuals are often our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
I obviously manage money and have views on markets, but the largest thing that I manage is our tactical strategy, which is a rules-based approach. And the reason it's a rules-based approach, again, we created the rules, but because it is a rules-based approach, because we also acknowledge the future is never known, and having a rules-based approach can remove a lot of the emotions out of making investment decisions, and that's why we designed the strategy, and it's been very successful over the last. We've been running the strategy for now 13 years now.
Yeah, we thank you. We certainly have a sleeve of it for almost every single client, and that is it. It's just taking the guesswork out. It's taking out
Makes our
emotions,
job
and
easier.
it's just it's allowing the algorithms to run their course to some respect. Anyway, thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll see you next time.
As a young man, heard the sky's the limit. First thing first, I'ma break through the ceiling. One life jam, but it feels infinite. One life damn, then I better go get it. Start out the bed in my suede shoes, feeling like the king, but they ain't blue. Elvis or LeBron, no, they won't do. I'm feeling like the boss, and I can't lose. But I have had cream in my coffee, mix the brown and the white, so it's like guess you are what you eat. Guess I am what I drink, and I drink too much every week. Late for a meeting, how class. Ran through, wonder where the cash. Papa got some brand new baggage, so I run out the door like my dad did. Woke up, something changed. Ooh, I feel myself today. Someone grab my cape, I'm about to do my thing. I ain't got it made, ooh, but I'ma celebrate. Someone grab my cape.